Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and as you can see, I've got a few things laid out here on the bench. I'm going to feed some strawberries. I've got some grit over there too that I can include with that feeding. The bin that I want to check in on is one that, when we last checked in on it, was 130 days of age and was receiving its 15th feeding, and at that point in time we reclassified it as no longer composting. It was actually in foraging for the past 2 weeks, but I've had a change of heart. I'd like to revisit this now 144-day-old African nightcrawler system. And my plan was to give them those strawberries, make that its 16th feeding, and take it out of foraging, put it back into composting mode, and at this point at 144 days, receiving its 16th feeding. Once we get into the bin, I'll explain a little bit better. So let's get it up on the bench and get to work on this. Oh yeah, I forgot. It looks like it's all strawberries because it's all red, but there's other red things mixed in there too. I believe they're radishes. This was a contribution of my mom's. It's been in my freezer for a couple weeks now, I believe, and it's time to do away with it. So let's get that tray out here. Alrighty, so now my reason for wanting to do this is because I rewatched the video from last time, and if it had just been a feeding, it's funny, there's a worm stuck to the roof of that piece of plastic. I felt like we've got quite a way to go with a few of the large chunks of bedding and cardboard that we placed down into the feeding area, as well as some newspaper. Man, this guy's fast. As well as some coffee filters, as well as a paper towel. There was just so much paper, and that doesn't look too good. Yeah, whatever. Sometimes you find a deceased worm. So yeah, down in the feeding area, we had piled in just so much bedding material last time, along with their feeding of pumpkin, that it seemed to me like, I really wanted to see that paper and cardboard and stuff all break down, and it seemed to me like if we're waiting for that to break down anyway, we could probably spur on that activity a little bit with some nice, delicious foods and maybe a little bit of grit too. So that was one of my main reasons. And I was also interested in pursuing the little test that we began last time we checked in here. Last time we checked in here, we had taken this end of the bin that's got the label on it, and we had oriented it to be facing away from us, so it was facing the wall instead of facing out into the room. And by being against the wall, this side got really chilly, and it had seemed to us as if, because it had gotten chilly, the worms had made their way over to what we thought was the warmer end of the bin. So this time I had switched it around so the label was facing in again, making this side chilly, possibly this side having a greater number of worms in it. So let's see. Well, you know what? Let's feed at the end. Let's check out how things in the system are coming along. A lot of my systems are suffering from dryness, but that doesn't seem to be the case in this system. I feel a good amount of moisture everywhere, even around the edges. All right, we're starting to hit some of this paper and cardboard in the feeding area. Let's save that for later. Maybe we'll first do a quick comparison of, first of all, this side of the bin that's up against the wall and is thought to be maybe a little bit chillier than the side facing the inside of the room. Although we have had a couple really nice days where it hasn't been quite as chilly down here in my wormery. In fact, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I filmed my video wearing just a short sleeve t-shirt because it was actually quite nice down here. It's starting to cool off a bit. It's still pretty nice down here, but I figured I'd put my basement jacket on for this check-in. So we saw a good amount of worms, but theoretically, this would be the chillier side and possibly the more sparsely occupied side, if in fact there is anything to it, and if in fact there has been such cold temperatures that one end would be cooler or warmer than the other. So let's see how things over on this edge look. Theoretically, this is the side that might be a degree or two warmer than the rest. And in the past we had noticed that it looked like more worms were occupying that side, but it was very unscientific, and I might have just been jumping to a conclusion. But it does seem like we've got a good number of worms all over the place down here. I don't think I can necessarily say that we're seeing more worms down here. Luckily, what we are seeing, though, is a good amount of moisture. That's going to help them break down this stuff. I did kind of sense from watching the last check-in, too, that the material in the bin was still quite a ways from being done. I mean, we're seeing a good amount of castings in here, but everywhere throughout it, it's got chunks of cardboard and stuff in it and paper. So I think while we're waiting for this stuff to gradually all get broken down, I think there's no harm in applying a little bit of food. So we're going to go in here and see how the pumpkin they got 2 weeks ago is holding up. My guess is that after that much time, and since there was very little as far as leftovers go in this system from what I remember, I think that stuff's probably going to be history, and they'll probably be glad to get a little bit of strawberry and radish, a little red color to liven up their brown bin. Yeah, I guess down here where the pumpkin was, that would be another place to expect to find some worms too. But last time it did seem like the end of the bin that we thought to be warmer did appear to have a greater number of worms in it than the portion of the bin where we knew we'd been feeding. So it did seem like warmth, if that was the real reason they were hanging out like that together, was more of a draw as far as getting a crowd of worms together than even the food had been. It's like down here is where all the cardboard is. Oh yeah, besides the pumpkin, we also had a few leftovers, but these are not the kind of leftovers I expect the worms to kind of turn to and just gobble up 1, 2, 3 after everything else runs out. To me, that just seems like the sort of thing that's going to take a great deal of time to very gradually break down so that the worms can actually eat it. So I don't really count that as readily available food, even though it's kind of a big, bulky item. There's another one in here too, as well as just half of one of those husk shells. Now we're hitting a lot of this cardboard and paper, which is what made me think it might make good sense to keep driving the worms into this stuff with some freshly added foods, and let the composting in the system continue for a little bit longer. Give myself another place where I can continue to put kitchen scraps and stuff, but limit it to the types of materials that we would expect to see break down pretty quickly. Last time too, we kind of peeked into this shell and we saw the seed inside like we do now, and I thought that we were actually exposing it at that point, making it available, and I thought we'd see more worm action in here. I mean, I could see a worm in there taking advantage of the situation. I believe it's a worm. So there too, let that stuff continue, but that's probably just going to get pulled out with the worms at some point in the future. So I don't know, this was one part of that large chunk of cardboard which went across the entire length of the system. I've got a feeling we're going to find other pieces of it, but it looks like it would have kind of torn up into little bits. And I mean, you know, makes sense, being submerged in damp material and pretty much being continuously soaked non-stop. It would tend to help a material break down. So to me, it seemed like if we were able to gather up a few of these bedding type materials, these scraps of cardboard and newspaper and coffee filters and paper towels and stuff like that, then we could rebuild this feeding zone. As long as we keep giving them foods that we know are going to get gobbled up pretty quickly, we're never going to be putting anything in here which will end up forcing us to wait because of that particular contribution. If we continue to just always put stuff in that's most likely going to break down a lot more quickly than any of the other stuff we're waiting on, then I see no harm in continuing to throw stuff in here. As long as we don't run out of space. And you can see we're getting pretty close up to the edge. It wasn't like that when we started, but you know, once you start piling stuff up and trying to make an opening and this and that, it helps to have a little bit of extra space in a bin so you can do little jobs once in a while. Look at that. This thing's actually breaking down quite nicely. This was like that big bulky end of the banana stem bunch. Actually, I think this is where the whole bunch connects up to, or you know what, I'm looking at it entirely wrong. That's actually the beginning of the banana itself, and I think there was a little bit of the banana in there too. So this is just peel with a worm. All right, I think we've given ourselves a good amount of space to pile in today's red meal. I just keep bumping into other leftovers in here. And I don't know, I'm curious to hear if people agree that it made good sense to reactivate this as a composting bin and take it out of foraging. It just seemed like we're going to be waiting on all these cardboard and paper bits anyway. Let's take advantage of that and let the worms continue working down additional kitchen scraps that I can keep providing to them over time. And you know, I bet if we were to check in here in another 10, 12, 14 days, we'll probably find very little bit of that strawberry and radish that they're getting here. I bet you that stuff will be history, and there'll probably still be chunks of this cardboard and paper left. And then maybe we'll be able to pile in a little bit more food for them, try to let this process continue. And, you know, naturally, if they want, they can continue on these slow composting old bits of stuff that have been in here for who knows how long. Be nice to see them continue to whittle all that down as well. And then at some point, I think we'll, you know, transition to the phase where we just let them kind of forage through the system and pick off any remaining little bits that remain. But I do want to get to that point where the only stuff that remains are, in fact, little bits. So that's a nice feeding. It's hard to tell when it was in the box how many there were, but you could see we've given them probably a dozen or more, at least. Yummy strawberries. Many of them appear to have already been in the process of decay when they were frozen in time. This one looks pretty nasty. So I would think once these things thaw, they're going to be able to break down and become goo pretty quickly. The worms will probably rush in and take advantage of that. This thing too, you know, I'm really skeptical anymore of whether or not this is going to show any signs of breakdown. And I'm just tired of looking at it, tell you the truth. I'm taking it out. It's heading over to the trash now. Let's cap off this feeding with a little dusting of crushed eggshell. While I don't think it's really needed for this type of a food, especially stuff like this, it's just going to kind of melt in their mouth. I don't know. I like to give them some here and there, but usually a bin that's been around for this long at this point probably has good amounts of grit just floating around in it in general, and the worms probably have everything they need from that standpoint. But that's just another material that I need to continue to do away with. So if I can give it to the worms, even in a place where they probably don't need it, like here, it's fine. I got no problem being generous with the grit too. I don't know, do you agree that airing the material out like this probably did it good? It does kind of have a high degree of moisture to it, which I think is just going to be to its benefit in the end in terms of being able to break down everything that's still in here. So I don't want to try to dry it at this point, so I'm going to cover up just the way we found it with the plastic bubble wrap, which has been doing a really good job. I believe we actually switched to the plastic bubble wrap last time we were in here. Previously we had just a plastic bag going from edge to edge. The idea, I believe, was that the bubble wrap might allow for a little bit more airflow underneath the bubbles and around its edges, and that might allow for a little bit of drying, which seems like it wouldn't hurt this system because of the high moisture level. But if it doesn't happen, that's fine with me too. I do like the benefit of, you know, little gaps in between these bubbles allowing for airflow. But if it's actually doing that and hanging on to the moisture really efficiently at the same time, I'm not going to undo that. I'm just going to let it continue as is. So that's it. I guess here we go. Back into the composting phase for our 144-day African night crawlers, the ones that we got from Gaetano. And I guess we'll be back in here to see how the strawberries are doing and probably to give them some more food. At least up until the point in time we start to see a lot of those pieces of paper, newspaper, and coffee filters and cardboard bits start to break down a little bit better. But I got no problem trying to squeeze another feeding or two in here if that's what it takes to get that stuff to all break down consistently. So that's it for now. I got a few things to clean up and put away, but I'm not going to waste your time with that. That's boring. Before I go, though, let me really quickly say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel, too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching.